2020 was a huge year for the Buffalo Bills. Not only did they go 13-3 and reach the AFC Championship game, but their young quarterback Josh Allen played like an MVP. And honestly, seeing if Josh Allen was going to take that year 3 leap was probably the biggest thing for this team. Of course, it would have been nice to win a Super Bowl, but knowing they now have a quarterback that's playing at a very high level, he's still very young, is probably the most important part if you're a Buffalo Bills fan. Brandon Beane, who's the Bills GM, won Executive of the Year, very much well-deserving in my opinion. The Stephon Diggs trade was one that really put that team over the top, so I have to give him a lot of credit for what he's done there. Their offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, went on some head coaching interviews, did not get any of the jobs he went for, so he remains there as the offensive coordinator. That will definitely help Josh Allen, so that's definitely big for Buffalo. And Sean McDermott's one of the better coaches in football. He has a ton of defensive talent, should be able to do well with that defense once again. So with all that said, here are my 3 expectations for the Buffalo Bills in 2021. So my first expectation for the Buffalo Bills is that Gabriel Davis and Zach Moss, 2 guys entering their second year, will play bigger roles for this Bills offense in 2021. So Moss and Davis were 3rd and 4th round picks last year, Moss 3 and Gabriel Davis in the 4th. They showed some promise last year. They didn't get too much work, but they definitely showed some promise. I think Davis had 7 touchdowns. Moss had some really nice highlights of, breaking tackles, running hard. He's a pretty good receiver. So I feel like if they gave him more carries, he'd be pretty good for this offense, honestly. Now, Moss did have a toe injury last year. He did miss some time, missed about 3 games, I believe. He had ankle surgery this offseason, so we'll find out if he's okay. If he's not, then this might not come to fruition, but if he's okay and he's healthy, I feel like he should have this backfield because I like Devin Singletary, but Singletary had a chance last year to show he's the guy. He averaged 4.4 yards per attempt. It wasn't too impressive. And honestly, I feel like Zach Moss is more talented. He's more of a complete, well-rounded back, more of a 3-down back type as compared to Devin Singletary, who's a bit of a smaller guy. And Zach Moss is definitely a pretty good receiver, right? I think we saw it in college. We saw it last year. Didn't have too many receptions, but he's a very smooth receiver, very tough runner. I like him, of course, near the goal line. And Matt Breida is a guy who they signed. He has had many injuries in the past. He's bounced around with Miami and San Francisco the past couple years. Not really a 3-down guy in my opinion. He's fast, he's exciting, but not really a guy that's going to be a starter in my opinion. I think they have like Tywan Jones too, not really a person to be concerned about there. And as for Gabriel Davis, he had some really big games last year when John Brown was out with injury. Or it might have been COVID, honestly, I forget. But John Brown missed some time in December, and Gabriel Davis really stepped up and had some monster games when he was out. So I know they have Emmanuel Sanders now, who they signed. I know they still have Cole Beasley, and they still have Stephon Diggs, of course. But I feel like as a 4th option in this offense, and maybe if someone gets hurt in front of him, I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is now like 34 years old, I feel like, maybe a bit younger, but still, he's pretty up there in age. Gabriel Davis might have a lot more targets than last year. So Davis last year had 62 targets. He had 7 touchdowns with that, by the way. But if he can get closer to that 90 to 100 target range instead of 62, this guy can put up probably 800 yards and 8+ touchdowns or something like that. Like, he can have a nice year for this team. I'm not going to say he's going to go out there and put up, 1,400 yards, but I feel like 800 yards is a pretty reasonable expectation for a guy like him, especially if someone goes down in front of him. So personally, I would like to see Moss get around 200 carries. I want to see Davis get around 100 targets. Will it happen? Maybe not, but I feel like if they got that type of work, they would definitely produce some nice results. My second expectation for the Bills is they finished top 10 in team sacks in 2021. So last year, Buffalo finished tied for 15th in the NFL with 38 sacks last season. I think that number gets a bit higher for them. You look at their front 4, they have some very intriguing names, even guys like Starla Tuieli, guys like Vernon Butler Jr., not even including them, but they still have Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, 2 veterans that are still playing at a pretty decently high level. I mean, Jerry Hughes was really good in the playoffs last year. And you look at some of the young guys they have, this year's first rounder, Gregory Rousseau out of Miami. We'll see what he can be. I feel like he's maybe a bit of a developmental project. We'll find out how he does. Carlos Basham, Boogie Basham out of Wake Forest. I was a big fan of his, has some really good pass rushing moves, very powerful as well. AJ Epinesa, who didn't make the biggest impact last year, but when he was on the field, played pretty well. I feel like he might take a step forward here. Of course, he was a 2nd-round pick last year, I believe. And even 2019's 1st-round pick, who I'm still waiting on, is Ed Oliver. So Ed Oliver came out of Houston very raw, but was just such a really good athlete, and he was a bit undersized for a defensive tackle, but that guy is a freak athlete. I feel like once he puts it all together, he'll be fine. Showed a lot of flashes his rookie year, but definitely disappointed last year. I hope year 3 is much better for Ed Oliver. But if those guys develop into the players they think they can be, then Buffalo might have a very scary front 4. And I do think the Bills will be set up for a lot of sack opportunities because, one, they have a really good secondary, tre'davious White, Micah Hyde, Poyer, all those guys in the secondary that can lead to coverage sacks. And number two, they will be playing from ahead most times or more times than not in the fourth quarter, which leads to a lot of positive game scripts, I guess you can say. Teams will be passing the ball against them in the fourth quarter. It will lead to a lot of sacks. So I feel like those things will add up for Buffalo, and I think by the end of the 2021 season, we'll find Buffalo top 10 in the NFL in sacks on defense. And number three, they win the AFC East back-to-back years. So they have not done this since the 1990/91 season, so it's been a long time for this team. Now, I will say, I think the other teams in this division, the Patriots and Dolphins, even the Jets, have all improved greatly this offseason, but I still feel like the Buffalo Bills have the best roster here. For Miami, it really depends on Tua Tagovailoa. If he develops into a top 10 quarterback in football, then they might win the division. But if not, then I feel like the Bills will be good enough there. I still think Buffalo has the best quarterback in this division. I know the Patriots made a lot of, off-season moves. They signed a bunch of guys in free agency: Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Matthew Judon, all those guys. They get Mac Jones. Cam Newton maybe is better in year two in that same system. But New England has to be a lot better on offense this year as compared to last year. They want to fight for this division. Now, Vegas has the Bills at 11 wins while the Dolphins and Patriots sit at 9. So they have them better by 2 wins. Of course, that can be wrong, but I feel like the Bills are in a good spot right now. A lot of continuity on that team. Brian Daboll stays. Everyone, all the coaches are the same. Josh Allen in year 4, playing for a contract extension, of course. I like where this team is going, so I feel like the Bills will win the AFC East for the second year in a row. First time since the early 90s. So that will do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next video, we have the Baltimore Ravens. That should be a good one as well. Talk about Lamar Jackson, some of their playoff history, all those type of things. I'll give some expectations for them. But leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys next time.